every relationship I got into was to prove that I was wanted. And I mean, think about that. That's one fear out of tons that's basically running my life. So until I really started doing this work and starting to do a deep dive about past traumas, past fears, past rage, what shame, sexual stuff, how was I going to start really living in the present moment rather than being driven by the past?
Welcome back to Too Light, Too Dark. This is the podcast where personal truths can meet clinical wisdom, lived experience, and some of the uncomfortable conversations that often sit just beyond the edges of everyday discussion. Today's guest is a psychologist whose work explores the way trauma and addiction, it can bleed into codependency, relationships, and fundamentally, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and how we connect with others. So much of modern life encourages us to move faster, perform better, stay productive. But underneath that surface, many people find themselves wrestling with anxiety, disconnection, relationship patterns they can't seem to break, or wounds that don't simply disappear because time has passed. In this conversation, we're diving into what it really means to heal, not as a self-improvement project or a quick fix, but as a process of understanding ourselves more honestly. We're going to explore the impact of early relationships, the challenge of vulnerability, and why awareness alone isn't always enough to create lasting change. So, welcome to Dr. Sarah Michaud.
Thank you, Leon. It's so great to be here. It's a total pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm going to jump right into a story. Tell us a story, if you could. Correct one misconception that most people have about addiction, healing, emotional well-being, what would that be?
I believe we're all the same. Like, I believe the human condition is really, we're all struggling. And just because someone's an addict doesn't mean they're any less than, or they're like, trying to hurt people or whatever. I mean, if I couldn't have been an addict, I wouldn't have been. But I really think we all have our ways of coping and dealing with our pain. And for some people, it's addiction. For other people, it's gambling. For other people, it's, making tons of money. It's not personal. And we're all doing the best we can. I mean, that's really the way I feel about it. And I know people don't like that saying sometimes, but I literally believe every single human is doing the best they can with what they have.
Nice. And just to touch upon your personal story, I've read somewhere that you've been in recovery yourself for a long time, Sarah. I don't want to give your age away and be rude like that. But yeah, give us a little bit of a timeline and what led you to the point where you were like, okay, I need to make a fundamental change.
Yeah, I mean, I got sober when I was 24 and I'm 66 now. So, yeah, it was a while ago. I started using as a teenager and I didn't know it at the time, but I was in a lot of pain. My first addiction was food. So before I even could drink, I was super overweight. I was addicted to sugar. Sugar was my comforting thing. And as a teenager, it's just those years can be so painful. In fact, when I see patients over the years, it seems like everybody has the common theme of like the most painful years being like 8th and ninth and 10th grade. I don't know. It's just a very tough time because if you don't look like everybody else looks and you don't feel like you fit in, it's going to be super painful. So anyways, I picked up alcohol at that point. But it was really the drugs. I got really into cocaine. And the problem is that cocaine costs a lot of money. Drugs cost money. So then you start getting involved with the legal system because I started stealing. And then I would start owing coke dealers money. And I mean, I really appreciate, and this is going to sound crazy, Leon, I'm so grateful for the drugs because I believe that if I didn't have the drugs, I could have drank for many more years
Right.
perhaps, but because I started getting into tons of trouble and my moral compass went down the tubes, sleeping with people for cocaine and like I tried to rob a bank one time and pull a check scam in Chicago when I was at college or attempting college and I got caught. And I mean, so I started doing all these things that you can't do forever. And, my bottom was at a coke dealer's house, um, on the floor, feeling like bugs were all over me, feeling I'd been up for 3 days. I'd taken God knows how many drugs to come up and go down, and I thought I was losing my mind. And, I remember, like, coming off the floor, and this is how long ago it was, going outside to a phone booth and calling, like, my brother, and I got into a psych hospital, and, those years are such a blur, I'm sure, with your own experience, it's like, I've done amends and I've cleaned up my past, but there are definitely moments that I still have today, a zillion years later, where I get that chill up my spine when I kind of remember something. So, yeah, I mean, I just feel like I'm on a mission from God to help people with their addiction and underlying codependency stuff because I think that's what can take people out over and over again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been I'm just looking at the date. It's been a decade for myself
Yes.
since I managed to wrestle away from a specific demon, if you will. But like you said, and like we shared a little bit before the podcast started, really, I'm still trying to get to grips and rebuild my inner self worth. And I wonder, just for yourself, Sarah, can you comment on that? Because obviously you've got more clean time in inverted commas than me, but
Right.
it's like for me, it feels like that journey's never going to end, and I'm accepting of that now.
Right. I mean, there's so many, I mean, life happens, right? I mean, I had a husband that relapsed and died. So, I mean, stuff happens in your recovery that, can be really hard. But I do believe, and we were talking about this, like when I put down the drugs and alcohol, I felt like, I had no skin. I mean, that's how I describe it because I literally felt just afraid all the time. I was like out in the world and I ended up, like, going back to school and getting really busy. Like, that was my first thing. I got really busy. I felt like I needed to learn. I was, like, really excited about recovery. I started making friends. So I got really into recovery early on. And the thing that I didn't know is I was doing a lot of substitution. I mean, I was smoking cigarettes like no tomorrow. I like put on a bunch of weight. I was like loved. I went back to the food. Now I had achievement addiction. I got into relationships. Like I had never really dated. And suddenly I'm like trying to have relationships and date. And I had no clue about doing any of that. I mean, yeah, so I mean, so I didn't even know early on that I was in kind of all this pain, that I had pain and shame and anger and fear, and that all that stuff was kind of running my life. I had no awareness. So, I mean, I remember when I got into graduate school to get a PhD, I moved out to California, and I'm 10 years sober. And I felt so nutty that I ended up going to treatment when I was 10 years sober. And it's not that I relapsed, but I literally felt like something was wrong with me. And I felt like, why am I continuing to get into these relationships that don't work out? I still feel, what I still felt like? I still felt like I was running in sobriety. I felt like I was running away from myself, that I really couldn't sit still. And so I started doing this really deep dive. When you're in graduate school, you got to do therapy. You were talking about analysis. I got into psychoanalytic psychotherapy and started really doing a deep dive on my history and what am I running from. And then I really got into the steps, in AA. I mean, some people do AA, some people don't. but around here, they have this certain program that you do, and I really saw that I was still operating out of fear. And, I'm someone that didn't even think I was afraid, right? I mean, I had a Harley Davidson, I had a bunch of tattoos, I like would do anything. I mean, I was someone who was like counterphobic. Tell me not to do it and I'm going to do it. But when I got sober and started looking at, they have this process where you say, talk about being driven by 100 forms of fear. And when I started looking at my fears, they weren't like fears of spiders or snakes or any of that stuff. They were interpersonal fears. So I'm being driven by a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment, a fear of you getting upset, a fear of you not liking me, a fear of you pulling away your love, um, you know, a fear of not being wanted. Like I had this realization when I did all this fear work, which I should send you because it's really great stuff. Um, that, there's two fears we're born with. We're born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises.
Right.
So any other fear that happens is based on an incident. So I started looking at, oh, so if I have a fear of not being wanted, the question is, when did it first start? What happened? And I had this awareness that I never thought my mother wanted me because my mother was an alcoholic. I had four brothers. She didn't know what to do with girls. And so I always had that experience of, oh, she didn't want me. She doesn't like me. And I had this realization in my own work that every relationship I got into was to prove that I was wanted. And I mean, think about that. That's one fear out of tons that's basically running my life. So until I really started doing this work and starting to do a deep dive about past traumas, past fears, past rage, what shame, sexual stuff. How was I going to start really living in the present moment rather than being driven by the past? I mean, this mentor of mine once said, most human beings take their past, throw it into their future, and are living into their past over and over again. And that's what I was doing, but it's all unconscious. I mean, anyways, I went on a rant. I'm so sorry.
No, no, that's good. It's real good. And I've pulled out certain things as you've been talking there, and there's various things that I went through and sort of really difficult questions that I had to ask myself
Yes.
within the context, I suppose, early recovery or early stage sobriety, and intimacy and
Yeah.
honesty. I would sort of caption them as, and I think I had to ask myself like, what and where am I still hiding from myself?
Yes.
What conversations am I maybe avoiding because they might change a certain interpersonal relationship and with myself? And then the big one was, am I being authentic, or am I performing a version of myself that I think is socially acceptable? Maybe you can speak on that, because that last one I think was probably the most difficult one, because I was a bit of a car crash as a person within that first couple of years of recovery.
Well, I mean, you're speaking my language because really the definition of codependency, I mean, there's a zillion definitions online, but my definition is I'm basing my behavior on how the world is responding to me. So, I mean, how can you be authentic if you're driven by fear of how, if someone likes you or doesn't like you, or are they going to abandon you, or so, I mean, it's also codependency is also I'm way more preoccupied with someone else's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors than my own. So again, if I'm basing my behavior or what I say based on, my boyfriend getting upset or not, how can I truly, be authentic? And I'm telling you, Leon, part of the reason I ended up later, after practicing for a zillion years, ended up writing a book and doing these podcasts is because in the 30 years I saw patients, there are two things that I found common with every single person. And if these two things were resolved, nobody would have any issues. I swear to God. And one is speaking up and saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And that may sound easy. And you may even say to me, oh, I do that. But I could give you 100 examples of not doing that. And I'm talking about from the littlest thing, from your partner saying, where do you want to go to eat tonight? And you say, oh, where do you want to go? And they say, well, I want Italian. And you don't want Italian, but you'll say, okay, fine. So
Yeah.
every time you dismiss yourself from the smallest thing, like a restaurant, to a big thing. I mean, I've had a woman say she's going to purchase this house with her husband and she didn't even like the house. It's like, or get married. I mean, I married two people. This was something I realized later in my journey because I was afraid of hurting them. Now, think about that. The second husband asked me to marry him, and I had told him when I started dating him, I never wanted to get married again. And what came out of my mouth? Yes. Now, why would I say that? The first husband, I was 39. I wanted to have a child. I was afraid of not having a child. And it wasn't like we weren't in love or but were we the best match? Probably not. But this codependency piece where it's not only not speaking up for yourself, it's not even knowing what you think and feel. I
Mm.
mean, I've been with couples where I'll ask the addict a question and the partner will answer. And I'll be like, because they're so codependent, they're actually speaking for the other person. So, this idea of authenticity and knowing what your thoughts are, knowing what your needs are, I mean, that's where we talk about the mental illness of addiction. I mean, you say honesty, and what I say is there's a lot of times I don't even know I'm lying to myself. Oh, yeah, that behavior's okay. Oh, it's okay if he does that or she does that. Oh, I don't really care. When you really do care, we can rationalize and minimize and deny so much to try to keep our relationships. And we think that it's because we don't want to hurt the other person. But really, what it is I don't want to tolerate what's happening inside of me. I can't tolerate that, so I make it about them, and it's really not about them. So, okay, so the first thing is speaking up, and the second thing is setting boundaries, which is really about speaking up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
People can't or have a heck of a time again, expressing what's okay and what's not okay, what I need, what I want, because they're afraid of what the response is going to be. And so, yes, authenticity is what it's all about. And yet, it's a very, delicate dance. And it's a tricky one because I think addiction is about being detached from who you really are, and it's being detached from intimacy. Like you said, intimacy is terrifying. And when we get sober, we really want connection and we really want a connection to ourselves, but it's really hard to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. I always found myself over investing in that connection in the early stages. So it would be 100%. You get all my love and all my love and all my love. And then as soon as it was reciprocated, I was like, actually, I don't want it. And then would back away into the hedge like Homer Simpson. And then I often think to myself, you made a great point there as well around honesty and the sort of aspiration. Everybody wants to be honest. Everybody wants to be righteous and tell the truth. Um, but yeah, my fiance will watch this episode with us, and the amount of time she goes, "Are you all right?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm fine," and I'm blatantly not fine. Like I've had a shitty day at work. You
Right.
know, my biggest son is not speaking to me. My daughter is moody with me, but just to people please, just to keep
Yes.
the peace in inverted commas. Yeah, I'm fine. And then really, I wonder what the lasting effect Because almost I see it as like every time you do that, you're chipping away at your relationship and your interpersonal connection. You're losing little sections of it every time you deny that authenticity. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, I mean, 2 things. I'm making a note here. Oh my god, you said so many great things. And we did an episode on our channel about this a few months ago about when you say I'm fine, even though it's automatic, you're actually lying. And so it's like, we're trying to be intimate in a relationship and we think, "Oh, I won't bother her. My fiancé doesn't wanna hear it," right? We'll rationalize, but it's really not about your fiancé. It's about, I will need to feel the discomfort of being vulnerable with my fiancé. I'm gonna have to be vulnerable, say my truth, and when I do that, I'm testing, can she tolerate it? Can she be available for that? And I'm sure she can. The thing is, it's so fascinating you talked about the intimacy and the hedge because there's a theory that I wrote my dissertation on, which is about when we've had God, I got choked up. When we've had trauma in our lives, what we crave the most is intimacy.
Mm.
And yet, simultaneously, what we are terrified the most of is intimacy. So we have this constant conflict. I so want it. I want it so bad, and yet it's terrifying. So it takes this really kind of slow, little bits and pieces at a time of practice. And the other thing, Leon, is another theory from years ago, I remember, is the greater the separation from who I'm presenting to the world and how I truly feel inside, the greater the depression, the anxiety, so if I'm not presenting who I really am, I'm going to be more and more and more detached from myself, which isn't good. And you're right. Like with the codependency piece, the dismissing of ourselves is the cause of so many problems: disconnection, lack of intimacy, depression, anxiety, physical problems, addiction, shame. I could go on and on and on. And yet it's really hard to like believe I have value, what I say has value, and it requires this like action steps, small action steps. And if people say to me, well, I can't set a boundary, I can't express to my girlfriend, what can I do? And what I say is practice with the person at Starbucks. Like, if they get your coffee wrong, ask for your coffee to be made right. Like, if you're struggling with the really big people in your life that you love, practice with people out in the world. See if you can do that because it does require practice. You're not going to be able to do it with your partner unless you really start to practice somewhere. Yeah,
Mm.
yet it's so important and so worth it.
And I was thinking about you mentioned codependency and shame-based codependency, and I think that I grew up in a single parent household with my mum, and I look at a lot of the pattern in later life that I've picked up from her, and there was almost an element for me that another question I used to ask myself in recovery and in that rehab space was I felt that to earn love it had to come through sacrifice. I felt that there was a part of me that believed that my needs were less important than the
Yes.
others' needs. And then from there, I was trying to make up probably for past mistakes by kind of over giving as well. And I look at how I ran towards my professional life after recovery as well. and I absolutely forgo everything. So I forgo any social life, anything at all, because my belief in that purpose, which was really a coping mechanism to not deal with me as well. So can you pick up a little bit on the sort of more shame-based codependency points?
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. What you just said is brilliant. And I always say that really, that's why I don't like the diagnoses and judgment and all that stuff. It's like, we are these kids, right? And we do exactly what we need to do to stay safe. So maybe it's overcompensating. Maybe it's taking care of your mom. Maybe it's like denying your own feelings. Maybe it's like over functioning. Whatever it is, there's a reason for it. And so the problem comes when we leave the home and we become adults and we still believe we need to keep functioning that way. And we don't. Like, there's no longer a depressed parent to take care of, but now we're going to keep meeting women that we can take care of or whatever. We keep playing it out in our lives. And the problem is, what that does is that accumulates resentment because it's fine. And I'm sure you are just this loving, caring guy. The trouble comes when it's like you're doing all these things that you don't want to do, or you don't have the energy to do, or you don't have the bandwidth to do, but you feel obligated to do. And now it's other people's needs are more important than your own. And you brought up a great point because the guilt and the shame, like when I work with parents, one of the biggest problems I saw over the years with parents who get sober is they're full of so much guilt that they end up overcompensating. And overcompensating is the worst thing for kids. Kids want boundaries, kids want limits. And yet, so many parents I know are like, well, I was drinking for so long, I should let them go do blah, blah, blah. But you know what? Kids that grew up in that want to know you're going to be there and you care. And how you express that is with boundaries. But it's very common out of our own guilt, we will overdo. And the shame thing, you're absolutely right. Like the shame, I'm sure you've heard this a bunch of times. Like guilt is the feeling over a specific action, and shame means that something's wrong with us, right? And the biggest solution to shame is, of course, speaking about it because it hides in the dark, right? Like that saying, with addicts, we bury stuff alive, right? you know,
Yeah, we do.
and it keeps affecting us, but we're so ashamed. And the thing that I've learned over the years is we've all done stuff that, you know, like again, you feel like you want to vomit, thinking about it. And so much of my recovery has been not just forgiveness of other people, because I am one of those people, and not everybody believes this, that forgiveness is freedom. Like, I don't want to hold on to stuff because I want to be free. And yet, a lot of people hold on to the not forgiving themselves. And I have to ongoingly forgive myself. I mean,
Mm.
it's so funny because when I started dating my boyfriend right now of a couple of years, I didn't even know he was sober. We met online on an app, and, so we went for this long walk, and after, like, an hour, we realized we were both sober, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Okay, I wanna hear the worst thing you've ever done, and I wanna tell you the worst thing I've ever because he goes, "I don't wanna worry that you're gonna find it out one of these days and not wanna be with me." So it was, like, so liberating because, like, I told him about the bank thing, and he tells me that the FBI raided his house, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah,
"Okay, we're addicts, that happens." So it's like we don't wanna carry that shame because shame really is just it's only about us. I mean, other people can shame us, but we will hold ourselves prisoner, you know?
yeah, for sure. I was thinking, and I almost got emotional there a second when you touched upon kids.
Back to the kids.
I am. I'm gonna go there.
Yeah,
Mm,
because it's super important.
it is, and I think that relationships with your kids after addiction was probably the hardest thing for me not to repair, because I knew coming at it like that was far too aspirational. It was more about how I was going to explain some of my actions and then make sure that I was going to be present moving forward and commit to build a connection. Because I think that some of my actions during addiction with my kids were um, not right.
Of course.
They were coming from a place desperation, lust after a substance. They seen me in all sorts of states and conditions, and it would be really hard, and it would be churlish for me to say sorry for that. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
some things I had to think about was the guilt and shame around it, and still to this very day, 10 years on, like, what guilt is helping me grow? So, is there a positive motivation that I can pull from that? Or what guilt is keeping me stuck? Am I still handing out money really when it shouldn't be handed out? Am I still not managing my boundaries? Am I trying to buy love? Um, do I believe somewhere that my children can truly, really love me while still being hurt about how they seen me once upon a time? And then I'm thinking, like, am I just trying to be like a perfect parent here because I'm afraid of being judged as a bad one? Or do I still see myself as a bad parent 10 years later, even though in some sense I have made real steps and amends since then, Sarah?
Oh my God, you said so much. And so this is the thing with me, and this just is my opinion. I think guilt is a useless emotion. I don't think it helps anybody. I don't think it helps us. And the thing is, it's like with amends work. Like when someone says, "Well, what are the things you need to make amends for?" Like I didn't need to think about that. Like that list was pretty damn easy, right? Um, but the problem is once you make the amends, of course we'll do living amends, but once you say what you need to say, and there's a way I think to do it appropriately, then it's like now it's up to them, you know? And so I don't believe, and I think this is the trouble with parents. I think they still, even though they've made the amends, they're so hooked in by past behavior that they still feel like they need to make up for it. And that's just where it's forgiving yourself. And I will say, in fact, I got to send you copies of my book because I talk a lot about my son, and all the stuff I had to do with him. And kids are literally to me, the hardest codependent relationship to resolve. And I'll tell you why. Because we care the most about them. Like, it's like they're a part of our systems. We know what we've done to them. We don't want to hurt them anymore. And it's so painful to be with that. And the thing that's so counterintuitive, Leon, is the best thing, and I will say this over and over again, to do with your kids is be the parent, meaning set the limit. Don't treat them like they're like really special and, oh, I got to pay for everything. Because the thing is, I got to tell you something. There was this quote in this parenting book when my son was young. And this author said, if you keep packing your kid's backpack, they're going to start believing they can't do it.
Mm.
And so there's something about when we overcompensate that we believe it's helping. And that's the thing with codependency. We think, oh, of course, we're parents, we'll do that. But that behavior over time, I believe, can chip it away at a kid's self-esteem and not put them in a position where they need to grow, where they need to make mistakes, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, I will say this. I have another saying, which is parenting is about the parents, meaning our own issues and our own pain can get activated all the time when we're trying to set a limit with kids. So, meaning there's another I know I'm throwing about a bunch of stuff, but there's another theory that when our kids are certain ages, so 6 or 8, or when my son was a junior in high school, I'll tell you a story. We are re-experiencing our own trauma from when we were that age. So, when my kid was a junior in high school, I remember he was getting ready. He didn't have a date for the prom and this junior prom, and I was, like, sick to my stomach. I was tormented by it. I started getting really controlling and wanting, and what was happening is I had had a totally traumatic experience during my own junior prom, right? And, like, he was fine. He's like, "I don't care if I'm gonna go." But I was so triggered and amped up, and finally, we sat down and talked about it, and he was like, "This isn't about me." Like, what, you know what I mean? And so that's just one example when he was older, but when our kids are younger, if we had had some stuff go on with us, it's very hard to discern what's our own issue and what are they really going through, because we perceive them experiencing what we did, and they're not. I don't know if any of that's helpful. And I will say to you also, just to validate you, that all of my clients over the years, the hardest thing for them to deal with is stuff that happened while they were parenting kids when they were active. I mean, I had a guy 2 years, never even mentioned he had kids.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm talking, it is very, so just to say this is a very, very painful, that's why you need lots of spaciousness with yourself, lots of forgiveness, lots of "I did the best I could, and I'm making up for it now, they have their own God," all that stuff.
Yeah, I think I've accepted 10 years on, and I can kind of see forgiveness maybe on the horizon.
Yes.
It's there, I can see it. It's beautiful, shimmering sunrise on the horizon. And I feel like I'm making little steps towards
Yes.
it. Every so often, it kind of it pulls me back in, like Al Pacino in The
Yes.
Godfather 3. It's like that. But I think my rational brain says to me, like, what does my 22-year-old son need right now? Does he need an explanation? Does he need an apology? Nah, he needs my consistency, right? And that's the
Mm,
important thing. I need to
yes.
remember, it's like a mantra for me.
Yes. And that's like those ages, professor of mine once said she never treats anyone between the ages of 18 and 24 because they all know everything, and they all think they're invincible. They don't actually think they're gonna die. They, like,
Yeah.
so I mean, my son is 24 right now, and yeah, the hardest time, like, I literally had to ask him to move out 2 years ago when he'd, like, finished college. He was gonna go off with a girlfriend, and I live in a tiny place. I sold my house where I brought him up, and I live in this, like, tiny place, and, like, we can't even be on the phone, and I said, "Bud, I know you're struggling. A relationship ended, but," I said, "I know that you need to be on your own, and I'm not saying this is right for everybody," but he was capable, and it was literally the hardest thing I ever did. I mean, and yet, it worked out, but it's so painful. So anyways, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your work over many, many years, and you mentioned psychoanalytic theory, and you mentioned the work you've done in academia. And a question I often ask myself is around this sort of notion of healing. About, is it becoming someone new? Is it about this claiming piece of who you were
Right.
before? Or is it the integration, the parts of ourselves maybe that we've kind of pushed away and cast
Mm.
aside? What would be your takeaway on that, touching upon your clinical expertise?
I think it's a great question. I mean, I often say this, which is such a nutty thing to say. I am a completely different person than when I was using, and I'm exactly the same.
Mm.
Meaning my internal spirit of Sarah, like I'm funny and I'm spacious and I like people and, I'm kind of outgoing, but I'm also like, I love being alone. So that spirit, like, has always been there and will be there till the day I die. But my behaviors, how I deal with my emotional world, how I think, all of that stuff is totally different. So, I believe that it's this ever evolving, broadening. Like, I know when I first started my practice, I had very, really opinions about the way people should be and the way therapy should be. And I think it's like the longer I'm on the planet, the more I know nothing. You
Mm.
know what I mean? It's like, I can't tell anybody else what to do. I don't know their history. Like, I can have my thoughts and beliefs about what works. And I also am a very simple thinker. I'm not like an intellectual, I see things broken down in very simple ways. Like, I'm not someone, and I joke with my son, he's a real intellectual and he could like talk about stuff forever. He reads millions of books about politics. And I'm like, but I'm just like, one of the biggest things that I think will help people is knowing your thoughts are just thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts. 99% of my thoughts are not even real. I can make up stuff all day long. I heard a guy the other night that was hilarious. And we were talking about fear on this meeting. And he said, fear is so debilitating and can lie to you. And told this story about that he went to the doctor and he got back a bunch of blood tests, and every blood test was elevated, and he has a heart condition, and he had literally decided he was dying, and he started to say goodbye to family members.
Jeez. Okay.
So then he says he got an appointment with his cardiologist, and like 2 days later, he realizes he was having a reaction to his medication, and it's like, but that's the human condition. Thing happens, we make up a story, and then we act on the story. And so to me, when I got sober, I started reading all this Buddhism. I got really into like mindfulness and Buddhist readings. And the biggest thing was our thoughts are just thoughts. They just happen. And 99% of them don't matter. And most of them are from the past.
Yeah.
So they're not even accurate. So to me, knowing how we think and getting a really spacious relationship with your thinking and doing like reality checking, and I have a lot of tools around that, like sticking with the facts, like what are the facts? Because we can make up stuff all day long about you, about me, about my neighbor, about my girlfriend. I'll make up stuff about, my boyfriend will do some behavior. I don't know, say he didn't call me all day or whatever. And then I'll be like, "Oh, he doesn't wanna be with me. Geez, he must have met someone." I know it's not real, but, like, he'll start, and then, like, at 6 o'clock, he'll say, "Oh my god, my phone died," or what, I don't know, tell me some story. It's like it's that negative bias too. We always make up something negative. It's not like I'm making up something positive, like he's going out to get me, like, you know, I don't know, some surprise, like, or maybe.
Yeah. Yes.
So, the thoughts and the feelings, and I don't wanna go on too long, I know we've talked a lot, but the feelings, like having a relationship with your emotional world, knowing how to identify, feel, express, and feel your feelings, to me is like the most important thing for someone in recovery, but also someone just who's human. Like, there's lots of people that live and die never being in touch with their emotional world, and that to me is so important.
Yeah.
Um, and then behaviors, changing your behaviors. If you keep doing the same behaviors, you're gonna get the same results. Yeah, simple.
Real simple. before I come to my three pillar section around understanding a little bit more about you in depthly in terms of things that you like and your taste stuff, something that jumped out at me just as you've been speaking is around contrast and perspective. And obviously, this podcast is called Too Light, Too Dark, name drop. So, like, the way I was thinking about it is, would I recognize peace if I had never known chaos? How is darkness and the darker sides of my personality and my guilt and my rage and my envy and all these kind of untapped things that people don't really talk about, how does that understand my journey towards the light, if you will? What experiences do I cherish now maybe that I once took for granted? How has loss shaped my capacity to love? And I think about
Mm,
kind of people who've left me early in my journey, like my dad, and then being sort of apart from various family members and being away from home at a really early age. And then I suppose what strength has been forged in
yeah,
that hardship, rather than sort of comfort as well. And I've picked all that up just from some of some of your testimony and things that you've said. What are some of your opinions on that contrast and perspective of
yes.
life, addiction, trauma, and healing, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I am totally with you. I mean, on a couple of bases. I think what we deny in ourselves will come out in some other way. So, I really think it's important. This woman I work with, who helps me, she often says, "You know the truth when you feel like throwing up."
Yeah.
And because there are things I don't wanna see, like, about a behavior, and because we think it means something about us, like, and it doesn't, it just means we're human. So, I do think and that's the benefit of psychoanalytic psychotherapy is my analyst was so spacious about owning the dark and the light.
Yeah.
Like, that not being ashamed. In fact, he used to say to me, "If you're talking about this stuff, you're someone I don't need to worry about." Like, it's the people that don't acknowledge the impulses, to wanna do certain things that he worries about. Um, so, yes, I totally am with you, and now I'm losing my train of thought about that darkness and light. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I do believe that out of tragedy, trauma, and this is maybe just my personality, but that something really positive can come out of it. Like when my husband relapsed and my life blew up basically, I mean, you know, I'm the psychologist working with addicts and I'm going home and he's passed out on the couch from Percocets, are you napping or did you take a bunch of Percocets? I mean, so my life blew up and I had a lot of shame about not knowing and how could this happen to me and all this stuff. But out of that experience, I ended up writing this book. Now not right away, but a lot of and also out of that experience, I had gotten kind of isolated and had stopped kind of getting my own support, and after I asked him to move out, I ended up finding this whole community of people. And so all these really positive things came out of that darkness. And so I do believe that. I believe, do I wish horrible things will happen to people? No. But I do believe that I also believe in perspective. Like my brother, who's a therapist, often says, "Sarah, pull the lens back."
Mm.
Meaning, we can get so self-centered and self-focused on my little trauma of what's happening today, rather than remembering, like, the people in Gaza or Ukraine or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, not to get political at all, but, I can forget what other people are going through. And I need to remember that also. So,
Yeah, that perspective piece is a massive, like, okay, you think you're Leon, you're in Ealing Common, you're in West London, you think this.
yes.
I think a comedian, Pete Holmes, once says, zoom out a little bit.
Zuma.
I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
you're on a planet
Exactly. Yeah, and, it's important not to deny our pain, like, I always say the both and. It's not black and white, it's not either or, it's all of it.
It's
Like,
all.
yeah, we're suffering and, let's get some perspective, both.
I love that you touched on some Socratic thinking earlier on as well. That suppose that the more you know, the less you understand. We've just touched on Pete Holmes, as I said. You're in America right now, but zoom out. Actually, you're on a planet spinning around a sun in a solar system.
Yes.
Like that perspective piece is massively important. And
Yes.
just to segue right in, I've got a three pillars
Okay.
question. I'm going to start off with books. What would be one book that you would gift to somebody tomorrow if you met them in the street, Sarah? And you can say your own if you want.
I am someone that constantly is getting into books and mailing them to people, one of my favorites that I guess you gotta be in a certain space for this or be open is The Untethered Soul. I
Mm,
don't know if you've ever read The Untethered Soul,
no.
but the reason I love it is because it's simple and he believes everything I do. I mean, and he talks a lot about interpretation, meaning how we make up stories based on what we see, based on our past. And he talks a lot about fear and how fear keeps us in these small worlds and we don't even know it. You know, so I love that book. I mean, I love the Four Agreements, some of the classics I love, just those old kind of psych books. But The Untethered Soul also one I've been reading for years that I would recommend anyone is Comfortable with Uncertainty by Pema Chodron. Is
Mm.
is a I read that daily and I still have it. It's next to my bed, just about this being a human. She just talks about being human. It's not about addiction. We use substances, but other humans use other things. So,
They
yeah.
definitely do. Next, I'm going to imagine that you're on a desert island, Sarah, right? There's a big screen there. Is there a movie or a TV series, something that you'd want to see up on that big screen on your own personal desert island, Sarah?
I mean, I'm a movie addict. So my son and I, in fact, we talked about the first time I took him to a movie, he was on my lap. And so what particular movie? You know what? I would say something, and I'd have to think about it because I've seen tons of movies, but something that would make me feel good, something that would make me feel human. I love action films and fun movies, but I also love a really moving film, where I know we're all in this together. So I'd have to think about it, but that's kind of the flavor of it. Something where I go, "Oh, we're all here. We're all struggling with the same stuff." You know? I mean, I loved the Michael Keaton movie, Clean and Sober, I don't know, because I'm someone who I feel like has to have laughter and you have to, maybe because I worked in a psych hospital, our sense of humor was so whacked because we've seen it all,
Yeah.
And so I'd say just like, strange things that other people may not joke about and addiction. That's why we started the YouTube channel because I'm so tired in a way of, like, everybody's talking about trauma, everybody's talking I feel like now people love talking about the problem because it gets likes or it gets clicks, and I really wanna stay focused on the solution. I wanna talk about the solution because I don't wanna be stuck in the problem. So, anyways, yeah.
And just to finish off that third pillar, if there was an album or a song or an artist, something that can take you away, and when you shut your eyes, Sarah, what would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to think of the songs lately that I've gotten obsessed with, you know how you get these songs and I've been hooked on a Creed song, I think it's called Higher,
Mm.
and it's like it's a great song, and the other one is, um, Sound of Silence, but by the guy that does it, Um, I don't know the name of the band, but it's really I think it's Disturbed or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
you're right, it's that one, yeah.
Yes, I love that song. I mean, I love music, so, I mean, I guess it's a mood thing. Like,
Yeah,
I'd love, just some perky, happy music by Lady Gaga also. So, yeah.
of course. Shouts out to Gaga and the Disturbed all at once, right?
Oh,
Um,
it's definitely a mood thing.
and I always think towards the end of a conversation, here's the addict in me coming out. I always get a little bit emotional as I kind of close it out. I always think of myself as a kind of lantern, sort of on a ship heading back out into the sea again. So as the final light flickers, if you will, if every listener could leave today's conversation carrying just one insight, one question, one little incy bincy practice into their own lives, what would you hope that would be, sir?
Oh my god, there are so many things. Oh god. Um, I wanna say, oh, I'm getting emotional. I wanna say have compassion for yourself. That's what I wanna say, because everybody has a tragic story, like all of us, and you don't need to compromise yourself to be loved, like, bottom line, and, take one small action step today because your thoughts and your feelings matter, but what really matters is taking an action step. So, do something that will help you today, even if it's small.
Yeah. And I'm gonna say to my fiancée when she asks me next time, I'm actually not fine. Actually, today I'm a little bit crippled inside and I don't feel worthy today. But I'm gonna take that from you, Sarah, and apply
Ugh,
that in my life. So I think to close us off, today I've felt real energy and I felt that compassion coming from you. I've also felt a load of love, and I hope that's been felt from your side as well.
yeah.
It's the conversation is reminding me that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's often about developing the capacity to stay present with the worst parts of ourselves, the best parts of ourselves that maybe we've spent years trying to outrun, suppress, or explain away. There's universality there, there's energy, there's awareness. It creates possibility. But remember, change requires practice, courage, and connection. If something from today's conversation resonates, we'd love to hear your reflections. What challenged you? What felt familiar? What questions are you still sitting with? If you're enjoying Too Light, Too Dark, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with someone who might benefit from the conversation, because these discussions don't end when the recording stops. Until next time, stay gold, stay curious, and stay compassionate. Much love, Sarah. Namaste.
Namaste.